Hi, it's Craig from Craig's To-Do List. I'm here with our Book Buzz podcast. I'm talking to a local author today who's been internationally recognized with several poetry awards. I'm speaking with Laurie Peterson, aka Laurinda Linda. She writes under both names sometimes. Laurie's a colleague of mine who I've known for quite a while. She is as I said, she's won some major poetry awards, and she's still writing and she's still submitting. And one thing we're going to talk a little bit about today is a chapbook of her poems that recently came out. It's called Trials by Water by Orchid Press. Laurie, let's talk a little bit about how the book came about, and then we'll talk about some of your background. So this book came about as by entering a contest, correct?
Yes. So it's Orchard Street Press in Gate Mills, Ohio. And I had gotten an invitation 3 years in a row, but I didn't want to enter the contest because it cost $12. And
Seems like a lot for a poem, right?
it adds up. But I entered that year, and I didn't win, or I wasn't a finalist, but they said that all 4 poems of mine made it to the final cut. And then they offered me the opportunity to send them a chapbook manuscript along with a couple other people who hadn't made the final cut. And then out of that, they chose 6 to 8, and I was lucky.
How did you choose these particular poems to be in this publication? Did you send them more and they chose it, or did you just send them all and they picked them all?
They just said, send a manuscript. So I took out all my published poems, spread them out on the floor, and I just started looking for linkages between them. I started to look for what they had in common. And I noticed that there were a lot of poems that had a water theme. And so I had tried to do a manuscript before with a similar title for a different contest. So I kind of cannibalized that one and added some better ones.
Are a lot of these poems inspired by the North Country and you living in the North Country?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we talk about that, I would just want to backtrack a little bit. I want to mention that Laurie is the Keats Shelley Prize poetry winner. This is an English prize, and he went to London to receive this prize, correct?
That was 2018.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Did you just submit it and forget it, and then they called you, or did you think you had a chance, or what was that feeling like? Were you?
That I had entered it the year before, maybe the year before that, and got nothing. Not even a rejection. And so, but it was a free contest still at that time. Now you have to. Prince Charles sponsors that magazine, so I guess you have to pay Prince Charles now to enter. But
Maybe it's because he can't read well or something.
and
what's the name of the poem that won that prize?
That was called Conscientious Objector.
Right. And how did that propel you to keep on submitting? Because I know as a writer, we talk a lot about this personally, about submitting and rejection. And for one of the reasons that I talk to young writers all the time about submitting, and how did you go about starting to submit again, and how do you deal with the rejection, and how do you know how you keep going?
Well, I mean, from my point of view, the key to becoming immune to rejection is just submit constantly.
Right. Just kind of submit and forget.
Submit and forget.
Right.
Yeah, I wrote the poem that we were just talking about, the England poem, sitting on the couch, with the TV going, with my husband grading papers and flipping through calls for submissions, and and I wrote a poem for that contest because I didn't have one that I liked, sent it out, and then just went on to the next submission. Mm-hmm. I was so surprised to hear from them.
Well, and so how are you now with submitting? Are you still submitting a lot, or are you in a writing stage or in a submitting stage?
I took an 8-month break in 2024, and and then we did a lot of traveling this fall, and all of those trips, like 1 week here and 2 weeks there, all I did was sit down and get all my poetry records straightened out. Then once I knew I had written down all the stuff the last year that I didn't even bother writing down. Then I felt settled, and I just started sending out again.
So your poems, if I have my information correct, have been published in print or in publications in every state but two. What's two states?
It is Hawaii and New Mexico.
Okay, great. And that must be a really cool marker for you. What's wrong with those two states?
Well, first of all, they don't have very many poetry journals.
Right.
And then you have to wait until the submission window comes around, and then if I'm in an arid period and I'm not even submitting, then I miss it again until
Right.
next year. So
Well, the weather's too nice in Hawaii. Nobody's reading. Everyone's outside. Well, great. I want to talk a little bit about the poem that you're going to read. You also won the Foley Poetry Award, correct?
Right.
And that is an American prize versus the English prize. And where is that out of? And is that associated with a particular magazine?
yeah, it's New York City, and it is America Magazine, which is actually a Jesuit magazine. And they have a monk poetry editor. And I know that they got about 800 or so, 600 to 800 submissions. The reason I know is that the next year I was a judge for the following year's contest.
Oh, is that part of the deal?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're going to have you read a poem. We're going to have you read the poem that won that prize that's included in this book. And it's called Letter to Myself While Learning to Read. Okay? Go ahead.
All right. So as I was telling you a little bit ago, this is a Black Lake centered poem for people who are interested in what poems have local geography behind them. Letter to Myself While Learning to Read. These nights out on the cold, closed-in porch, on your folding cot, because your teenage cousin takes your bed all season. Your many hours surrounded by dark windows, as if you are a theater for stars and ghosts that your family believes in. As if you are a child lost on the water in a boat cast off from its lines. This must be why your father sits and reads to you, the only time he will do this, teaching the terror to teach you out to skip you out here on the edge of a family to which you feel like an afterthought. This crowd of people he brings into the room to keep you company, a girl named Heidi, halfway up a mountain with a gruff grandfather. Also Robinson Crusoe, a stranded sailor, not all alone on an island, since a man he treats like a child still chooses to stay and help him. Another story that sounds like a real family, not incidental like yours. Swiss, but also named Robinson. And how they go high into trees, taking everything up one level away from what can grab them in their sleep. They're platforms that say, every time you shipwreck down below, you will still be whole somewhere up above. And as you turn a page to learn its letters, you start to reach your hand out into the night, where someone from another world wants you enough to squeeze back.
That's great. We get a real sense of what it's like to, be sort of like in a large group and trying to find, time away, right? Our privacy.
Well, also in here, autobiographically, being an only child.
Right. Okay. Great. Do you have any other publications coming up that we know that you want to talk about?
I do have a couple things hanging out there. I'm waiting. I just heard from. I just saw online, and haven't even saved them yet. My publication from a magazine, Feral, just came out, and Friends magazine, which is a Quaker journal, surprised me and took two poems. I didn't think they were all that wild about poetry.
What can you talk? I'm just going to go a little bit longer. I'm reading a little bit about your bio and how you've done so many different things, right? Why do you think being versatile and trying different things is important to writing? So you've been a waitress, You've been you've been a cleaning lady, right? Or person, I should say, is the correct term. A seed factory packer, a copy editor, a freelance journalist, caregiver. You've had a really varied background where you kind of just did what was necessary to either survive or to get through. And why is that so important to create, or how do you think that comes out in your work?
I think it's kind of lucky in a way for writing not to be too privileged right out of the gate, because you have these challenges that you have to stretch yourself for, and in the stretching, every time you stretch, your writing stretches too.
Right. Do you have like, I mean, I know so little about the poetry world. I'm a writer and I'm a horrible poet. So I'm kind of amazed that you're able to do this, because I could not possibly do this. In the poetry world, do you have little fans? I'm curious about what a poet fan looks like, or can you completely be under the wire and have nobody know you?
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it is. I got a Facebook message out of the blue, though, last week from somebody saying, I just love your poetry. I have no idea who this person is. And I was almost afraid to reply at first, because who knows who's trying to hack you. But turned out to be like a legitimate person who's into poetry. And I don't know how she stumbled across my poems, but it sounded like she is newly enthusiastic about poetry and trying to find her way, and Googling around, I guess.
Right,
So,
great, cool. Well, I'll put the link to Orchid Street Press. I'm sorry for this scrapbook. I'll put the link in the story, so if you want to purchase it, you certainly can. And I really appreciate you coming and talking to us today. You certainly you have rock star status in the poetry world again. For those who know poetry, and we're really glad you came in today, and keep on writing.
thanks. I can't write plays either, so don't feel bad.
Well, we all have our curses. Thanks again, Laurie.
Thank you.